The ground rumbled long before the alarms began. At first, it was just a low, uncertain tremor, like the heartbeat of something buried too deep to matter. Then came the light, thin cracks of gold splitting the gray crust of the valley floor, spiderwebbing beneath the scavenger camp. Cale Renford looked up from the broken drone in his hands, brow furrowing as his coffee cup slid off a crate and shattered. A second later, the mountain roared. The Dretheri had been digging for weeks, their machines carving trenches into the ancient bedrock. Massive pylons pulsed with dark energy, feeding into a core that shimmered with symbols no human could read. Cale had told them they were insane to wake what slept under their Ion 9, but they never listened to humans. Now, the world was shaking itself apart to prove him right. Around him, Dretheri soldiers barked orders, their scaled forms glinting under the crimson dawn. Plasma cannons hummed to life as chunks of debris fell from the cliffs. "Contain the breach," one shouted in their harsh, resonant tongue. "Do not let it rise uncontrolled." Cale grabbed his tool satchel and ducked behind a rusted transport as the ground split open. A blinding surge of heat rushed upward, and a column of molten air tore through the sky. The air screamed. And then, out of the fracture, something vast began to emerge. At first, Cale thought it was a mountain. Black plates of living metal pushed through the dust, edges glowing with inner fire. The shape unfolded, rising higher and higher, until its silhouette blotted out the sun. A head, long, crowned with blade-like horns, lifted toward the horizon, eyes igniting like suns. A roar followed, rolling through the canyons and out into the wasteland beyond. Every Dretheri dropped to their knees. Even their warlord, Virsha Critton, stood frozen, her staff trembling in her claws. "It can't be," she whispered. "Azreth. The unyielding flame." Cale's mouth went dry. He'd seen Dretheri relics before, statues, old AI husks, ruined ships, but this was alive. Its scales shifted, reshaping, exhaling streams of plasma that scorched the air. Lightning coursed along its spine as if the sky itself bowed to its will. The machine dragon stretched, shaking centuries of dust from its wings, and the valley floor buckled beneath its weight. The Dretheri began chanting, their voices rising in a guttural hymn. "Azreth! Azreth," they cried, believing their prophecy fulfilled. Weapons lowered. Soldiers trembled in reverence. Virsha stepped forward, raising her staff high, the sigils on her armor blazing. "I am Virsha Critton of the bloodline," she declared. "Heir of the generals. I call you to service. Rise and obey your true commander." The dragon's gaze fell upon her. For a heartbeat, all seemed still. Then its head tilted slightly, and a low, rumbling growl rolled from its chest, a sound not of obedience, but of amusement. Its eyes shifted past her, and locked onto Cale. Every instinct screamed for him to run. He stood ankle-deep in cracked soil, the wind whipping dust against his face, staring up at a creature the size of a city block. The dragon inhaled, and Cale braced for fire. Instead, it lowered its head until its massive snout hovered just above the ground. The breath that rolled from its nostrils was hot enough to make the air shimmer. Cale blinked, swallowed hard, then, without really thinking, stepped forward. Hey there," he said, voice barely steady. "You, finally woke up." Silence fell. Every Dretheri froze, their chants dying mid-syllable. Virsha's staff clattered to the ground. The dragon exhaled a slow gust that nearly knocked Cale off his feet. Then, with a deep, resonant hum, it lowered itself further, wings folding tight, tail coiling behind it like a mountain of steel. The earth groaned as it sank into a kneel. "Imprinted soul detected," it said, its voice echoing not in the air, but inside every mind present. "Command presence confirmed." Cale blinked up at it. "Wait, what?" The Dretheri shouted in outrage, some firing their weapons, others dropping in worship. Plasma bolts hit the dragon's armor and vanished harmlessly, absorbed into its glowing plates. Azretha's eyes burned brighter, but it did not attack. Instead, it turned its head toward the Drethari warlord, voice rumbling like thunder. "This world has forgotten its oaths," it said. "But my commander endures." Virsha stumbled back, her scales paling. "Impossible. A human cannot." Kale scratched the back of his neck, glancing up at the colossal machine. "Listen, big guy, I think you've got the wrong." A shockwave rippled outward as the dragon's chest lit with crimson light. "Do you not remember your name, imprinted one?" Kale felt something stir behind his eyes, a flicker, a voice not his own. A flash of fire, a battlefield under two suns, a Drethari general standing atop the ruins of a city. Then it was gone. He stumbled back, gasping, the ground trembling beneath his boots. "Okay," he muttered. "That's new." The Drethari forces began to fall into chaos. Some turned their weapons on Kale, shouting that the prophecy was corrupted. Others threw themselves to the ground in reverence. Virsha, torn between fury and disbelief, raised her blade and screamed, "He is a thief. Kill him before the dragon binds fully." Azretha's eyes flared, and the sky itself seemed to split. Lightning rained down, striking the ground in perfect lines, forming a barrier of fire between Kale and the Drethari army. The warlord halted mid-charge, her weapon trembling in her grip. Kale looked up at the towering machine, the wind howling around them, dust swirling in storms of gold and ash. The dragon stared back, motionless, awaiting his word. And for the first time, Kale realized every eye on the battlefield was on him. The wind tore through the valley, carrying with it the metallic tang of ozone and scorched earth. Kale stood motionless, dust clinging to his jacket, the heat of Azretha's presence rippling through the air. The Drethari army had scattered into two factions, one kneeling, chanting old hymns of allegiance, the other roaring in fury, their plasma rifles aimed at the man they now called usurper. Azreth loomed behind him, wings half-folded, eyes burning like twin stars. The dragon's voice rumbled through the minds of all present. "All that draw weapons against the imprinted one defy the covenant of flame." The words were heavy, ancient, more command than sound. Kale winced, gripping his temples as the echo rippled through him. "Hey, big guy," he muttered under his breath, "maybe, keep it down a bit." Azretha's gaze lowered, focusing on him as if he were the only living soul left. "My voice obeys your will, Commander." Kale froze. "Commander?" Behind him, Virsha Critten's claws dug furrows in the dirt. "He is not your commander," she hissed, stepping forward. Her armor shimmered with sigils of rank, ancient glyphs pulsing with psychic energy. "I am Drethari. I carry the blood of the high generals. You cannot kneel to a soft-skinned scavenger." Azretha's head turned toward her. The air tightened. Every Drethari soldier nearby dropped to a knee, not in reverence, in terror. Kale raised both hands. "Hey, whoa, easy. Let's all take a breath, yeah. No need to melt anybody." The dragon's growl faded, though its gaze stayed fixed on the warlord. "This one bears the bloodline. But lineage alone does not bind the soul." Virsha's teeth bared. "What trickery is this? The binding right is Drethari only. A human cannot share a soul imprint." Kale rubbed his temples again. "You think I planned this? I was just trying to fix a power cell." The Drethari warlord advanced, plasma blade igniting in her hand. "Then your death will undo the mistake." Azreth shifted. The ground shook as its massive tail coiled protectively around Kale. The machine's roar erupted again, scattering sand and rock across the valley. Every Drethari soldier fell back, weapons lowered instinctively. Kale stumbled as a gust nearly lifted him from the ground. "Buddy," he shouted, trying not to panic. "Stop it." "I'm not, just stop." The dragon froze. Its gaze softened, or as close to soft as something made of plasma and metal could manage. "As you command." Silence followed. The Dretheri, disoriented and trembling, dared not move. Only Virsha remained standing, glaring through the haze. Kale exhaled shakily. Okay, that's good. That's better. Thanks. He turned slowly to face the colossal machine. His reflection shimmered across one of its glowing plates. Listen, Azreth, right? I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not your commander. I'm not anyone's commander. I'm just a guy who fixes junk and drinks too much coffee. The dragon lowered its head again, eyes unblinking. Designation irrelevant. The bond endures. Kale frowned. What bond? The soul imprint. Forged in war. Preserved through death. A flicker surged through Kale's mind again, flashes of fire, marching Dretheri legions, a colossal shadow above a burning world. He gasped, stumbling. When his vision cleared, he saw Virsha watching him, suspicion turning to horror. You saw something, she whispered. What did you see, human? Kale shook his head. I don't know. Just, a memory. Maybe his. He looked back at the dragon. Yours? Azretha's eyes dimmed slightly. Fragments of the First War. Your essence carries the echo of my commander's will. It is enough. The warlord's voice cracked with fury. This cannot be. The prophecy speaks of a general reborn, not a human scavenger. Azreth turned its gaze toward her again. Prophecies are the chains of those who fear change. Kale couldn't help but smirk faintly. I kinda like that one. But Virsha would not yield. She raised her blade once more, shouting to her troops. Seize the human. Bring him before the council. If the dragon defends him, then we bring it down. Dozens of Dretheri soldiers roared, their weapons igniting. Plasma burst streaked through the haze, only to vanish against an invisible barrier that shimmered around Kale. The ground beneath his feet glowed, ancient runes pulsing to life in circles. What the hell, he whispered. Azretha's wings spread wide, casting the valley in shadow. None may harm the imprinted one. Its voice shook the air. By flame and oath, all who strike shall burn. Columns of light erupted from the earth, cutting between the opposing armies. Virsha shielded her eyes, roaring in defiance, but even she faltered before the dragon's power. Kale's heart hammered. He didn't want this, any of it. He just wanted to live long enough to get paid for scrap and go home. But every moment, every breath, told him this thing, this being, had chosen him. He turned slowly, looking up at Azretha's immense, waiting form. The dragon bowed its head again, as if waiting for an order. I don't want to hurt anyone, Kale said softly. Azretha's eyes flickered. Then your command is peace. And just like that, the light dimmed. The air cooled. The runes faded back into the dirt. When Kale looked around, the Dretheri army was on its knees, not out of worship, but sheer disbelief. Virsha stood trembling, her blade lowered, voice raw with rage and awe. What manner of human are you, she whispered. Kale sighed, rubbing his neck. Honestly? Still figuring that out. The dragon's voice hummed softly, almost like a purr. Welcome back, Commander. Kale glanced up at it, squinting against the glow. Yeah, he muttered, half to himself. Guess we're doing this. The dust had barely settled by the time the Dretheri banners vanished beyond the ridgeline. Their retreating warships left contrails of violet smoke across the sky, a fading mark of their humiliation. Kale stood at the heart of the crater, hands shoved in his jacket pockets, watching the massive shadow of Azreth loom across the broken terrain. The dragon's presence bent light, the air shimmering around it as if reality strained to contain its size. The battlefield was silent now, save for the crackle of settling debris. A few Dretheri stragglers knelt in the distance, still chanting the name of the unyielding flame. Kale had no idea what to do with them. He wasn't a leader. He wasn't even sure he'd eaten that day. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. "I talked to an ancient war machine and suddenly I'm a commander. What's next, universal taxes?" A low rumble vibrated through the ground, Azretha's version of a laugh, maybe. "Your humor persists even in ascension." "It is, comforting." "Comforting? You just vaporized a platoon of angry lizards and called me your boss." Kale rubbed his temples. "None of this makes sense." Azretha's eyes narrowed, glowing softly. "Sense is the language of the present. We were forged in a different tongue." Kale sighed, looking up. "You're really big on the cryptic stuff, huh?" He turned, squinting at the horizon. The Drethari encampment was already being dismantled by frightened soldiers. Virsha's army had fractured, some following her retreat, others scattering into the wastelands. The power vacuum was forming fast. Kale could feel it, like a storm in the bones of the world. A shadow flickered nearby. A small figure sprinted across the cracked terrain, a human, young, wearing scavenger gear patched together from Drethari armor scraps. She waved wildly, clutching a datapad in one hand. "Kale! You absolute idiot!" He turned, blinking. "Saran! What are you doing here?" "Trying not to die," she shouted, stumbling to a halt beside him. Her goggles were smeared with soot, her braid half undone. "You just woke up the biggest murder lizard in the galaxy and made it kneel. The whole planet's seen it. Every sensor, every comm relay, they're all screaming your name." Kale groaned. "Fantastic. Exactly what I needed." Saran glanced up, and froze. The dragon's shadow engulfed them both. "That's it," she whispered. "That's the war machine. It's beautiful." Azreth inclined its massive head, eyes focusing on her. "This one carries human spark. A lesser echo of the commander's essence." Saran blinked. "Ah. Thanks. I think." Kale stepped forward, motioning to the machine. "Buddy, she's a friend. Don't, I dunno, disassemble her or anything." The dragon's gaze softened. "All who are named friend by you are under my protection." Saran turned to Kale, wide-eyed. "You tamed it." He shook his head. "No. It's not a pet. It thinks I'm someone else." "Someone else doesn't stop a Drethari army with a word," she shot back. "Whatever it thinks, it's listening to you." Before Kale could respond, the ground trembled again, smaller this time, rhythmic. In the distance, Drethari skimmers appeared on the ridge, their lights scanning the crater. Recon units. Watching. Waiting. Word of the awakening was spreading. Virsha would return. And she wouldn't come alone. Kale rubbed his jaw. "We can't stay here. This place is gonna be a war zone in an hour." Saran gestured at Azreth. "And what, we just, tell that thing to follow." The dragon's head tilted, as if hearing her. "My form is vast, but I can travel beneath the crust. None will track my passage." Saran stepped back, awestruck. "It tunnels." Kale glanced up. "Can you take us with you?" "Of course," Azreth rumbled. "The imprinted one does not walk alone." Kale hesitated. "Okay, that's, actually kind of sweet. Also terrifying." He looked at Saran. "You coming?" She gave a half laugh, half sigh. "Like I have a choice." Azretha's wings folded tight, and with a seismic groan, the dragon began to sink. Plates along its limbs shifted, glowing with molten light. The ground around its feet turned liquid, and in moments, the enormous creature had begun burrowing into the depths, the earth swallowing it whole. Kale grabbed Saran's arm, pulling her toward the collapsing soil. "Hold on," he said. The world inverted. The air turned hot and heavy, the ground moving like a living thing. They plunged into darkness, weightless, surrounded by walls of burning metal that pulsed with strange energy. Azretha's body formed a shell around them, protective and alive. "Where are you taking us?" Kale shouted over the thunder. "To the heart of what remains," Azreth replied. "There lies the truth of our bond, and the memory of the war you ended." Kale's heart pounded. He glanced at Saran, who clung to the side of the glowing passage, eyes wide with wonder and fear. "Kale," she said softly. "You realize what this means, right? If that thing remembers you, then somewhere in its memory, there's proof of what happened to the Drethari generals. Maybe even how their empire fell." He stared into the light. "Or how it started." The dragon roared again, and the tunnel blazed with red-gold fire. Above them, the Ion 9 shuddered, a wounded world stirring as something ancient returned to life. For a brief moment, Kale thought he heard whispers in the flame, voices speaking in a language he shouldn't understand, calling him by a name he didn't know. Then they were gone, swallowed by the dark, as Azreth carried its human commander deeper into the bones of the planet. The tunnel shuddered as molten light pulsed through its walls, forming veins of gold and crimson. Kale pressed a hand against the shifting surface, feeling the dragon's heartbeat thrum through his palm, deep, rhythmic, alive. The air tasted like copper and ozone, and each breath carried a faint vibration, as though the air itself was listening. Saran crouched beside him, staring wide-eyed at the glowing passage twisting ahead. "You sure this thing knows where it's going?" she muttered. Kale gave a weak laugh. "Not remotely. But it's not like we've got a map." Azretha's voice rolled through the tunnel, calm and resonant. "We are descending to the Crucible Vault, the forge where I was born, and where the final battle burned the sky. The memory fragments within me converge there." Saran frowned. "Memory fragments? You mean, data?" "More than data," Azreth said. "Fragments of will. Of soul." Kale leaned back against the wall, staring into the glow. "I'm starting to think you Drethari built more religion than technology." "You misunderstand," the dragon replied. "The Drethari did not build me. They birthed me, through will and sacrifice. The forge consumes years to breathe life into steel." Saran adjusted her scanner, the device flickering erratically. "There's so much interference down here, electromagnetic, psychic, you name it. I can't even tell what's solid anymore." Kale squinted at the shifting patterns along the tunnel. The walls weren't smooth anymore, symbols flickered beneath the surface, runes bending and rearranging as if reacting to his presence. He reached out. One glyph glowed brighter under his hand, sending a pulse through the chamber. Azreth rumbled softly. "It remembers your touch," the dragon said. "That mark was the seal of command. You placed it there when you forged the pact." Kale pulled his hand back. "You keep saying I did things. But that wasn't me. That was some Drethari general you knew." The dragon paused. "The essence is the same. Form is fleeting. Spirit endures." Saran tilted her head. "So you think Kale's, what, reincarnated?" "Rebirth is a Drethari superstition," Azreth said. "But the bond between commander and construct transcends flesh. It is not the body I recognize, but the resonance. His presence calls me awake." Kale rubbed his neck. "So I'm basically your echo?" Azretha's eyes flickered in the darkness ahead. "You are what remains when a soul chooses to return." Kale didn't answer. The silence between them stretched, filled only by the low hum of molten earth. Finally, Saran whispered, "Kale, maybe that's why the Drethari wanted to find this place. They weren't just digging for weapons. They were looking for a legacy." He gave a tired smile. "Yeah, well, they found one. And it hates being woken up." A rumble passed through the tunnel, different this time. Not the steady pulse of Azretha's motion, but something external, distant. The ground trembled again, sharper, followed by a thunderous crack. Azreth halted. Surface activity detected. Drethari warforms approach. The warlord returns. Kale's chest tightened. Virsha. She's tracking us. Saran cursed. How? You said we couldn't be traced underground. Azretha's wings flexed, scraping against the molten rock. She uses blood runes. The bond of ancestry grants her insight. She seeks to claim what she believes is hers. Kale ran a hand through his hair. And I thought scavenger politics were messy. The tunnel shivered again. A narrow fracture split the ceiling, and a beam of cold light pierced through, scattering sparks across the walls. Above, faint outlines of ships could be seen, Drethari carriers, hovering over the crater. Can we outrun them? Saran asked. Not beneath open ground, Azreth said. But I can shift deeper. There is a river of magma that leads to the vault. We will be beyond their reach there. Kale nodded. Do it. The dragon roared, and the earth opened wider. Streams of molten stone cascaded downward as the massive construct plunged deeper into the planet's mantle. Heat wrapped around them, oppressive and alive, but Azretha's shield held firm. As they descended, Kale felt another flicker in his mind, sharper this time. Images bled through, a war council, a circle of towering Drethari generals, their armor slick with blood and fire. A voice echoed among them, his own, but deeper, commanding. We end the cycle or burn with it. He gasped, clutching his head. Saran reached for him. Kale. What is it? He shook his head. Memories. Not mine. Azretha's tone softened. You begin to remember. The imprint awakens. Kale stared at the molten river below. What if I don't want to remember? The bond does not ask what you want, Azreth replied. It shows you what you were, so you may decide what you will be. The dragon's massive body twisted, wings slicing through magma like silk. Ahead, a faint light flickered, pale, unlike the fire around them. A structure emerged from the heat, a colossal gate half buried in obsidian, inscribed with ancient Drethari script. The Crucible Vault, Azreth said. The heart of all that remains. Kale swallowed hard. The sight was overwhelming, a fortress forged inside the planet itself. Saran whispered, if the Drethari ever find this place. They cannot, Azreth said. Only the imprinted one may pass. Kale stepped forward, every instinct screaming to turn back. The gate pulsed once, recognizing him, and the symbols shifted, opening like an eye. Behind them, the distant roar of Virsha's forces echoed through the tunnels. Kale looked back, then at the light beyond the gate. Guess we're about to find out what kind of commander I really was. And together, they stepped into the vault. The vault opened like a wound in the world. The heat gave way to cold, the molten light fading into a vast chamber lined with obsidian pillars and suspended platforms. The air shimmered with residual energy, memories made visible, threads of light twisting through the dark like drifting spirits. Kale stepped forward cautiously, boots echoing on metal that seemed older than the planet itself. Each sound rebounded, carried by a silence that felt alive. Azretha's voice reverberated gently, quieter now, as though reverent. This is where I was forged. Where you bound your will to mine. Kale looked up. The ceiling stretched beyond sight, constellations etched in silver across its surface. At the center of the chamber hovered a crystalline core, enormous and pulsing faintly, its light refracting into countless shards that danced across the walls. Saran approached it slowly, eyes wide. Kale, this isn't just a forge, she whispered. It's a memory lattice. Every piece of Drethari history could be stored here. Kale's gaze lingered on the core. Then maybe it can tell us what really happened. Azreth lowered its massive head beside them, wings folding inward. Touch the heart, Commander. It will remember what you cannot. Kale hesitated. He glanced at Saran, she gave a small nod. Slowly, He reached out. His fingers brushed the crystal surface. The world exploded into light. He staggered, blinded, the chamber dissolving around him. When his vision returned, he was standing on a battlefield beneath twin suns. Armies stretched across the horizon, Drethry legions, their banners torn and burning. The sky churned with ash and flame. And there, at the forefront, stood a figure in black armor, tall and commanding, eyes burning with the same fire that filled Azretha's. Kale knew him. Somehow, instinctively. He felt the weight of that armor, the ache in those hands. This was the memory, no, the echo, of the soul he carried. A voice called out across the chaos. Viosha's ancestor, perhaps, or another general, shouting over the roar of battle. The enemy will not yield. The planet will burn with us. The armored figure, the past Kale, turned toward the sky, where the silhouette of Azreth blotted out the suns. Then let it burn, he said. Better ashes than chains. Kale felt the words leave his own mouth, heard his own voice merge with the echo. The memory rippled, fracturing. Flames devoured the vision. He stumbled back, gasping, and the vault returned. Saran caught him before he fell. Kale. What did you see? He took a shaky breath. War. A final stand. He used Azreth to end everything. He looked up at the dragon, whose eyes dimmed with sorrow. You didn't lose the war. You ended it yourself. Azretha's rumble was low, mournful. At your command. You saw what we had become. You chose annihilation over conquest. Saran's voice trembled. You destroyed your own empire. Kale's hands curled into fists. He did. I didn't. But I carry his choices. His mistakes. He turned toward the crystal again. That's why you woke me, isn't it? Because the Drethry never stopped fighting. The cycle started again. The cycle never ends, Azreth said softly. Until one remembers why it began. The chamber quaked suddenly. The light of the crystal flickered, and Azreth raised its head sharply. Intrusion detected. The bloodline approaches. Kale spun toward the gate. The obsidian doors shuddered under an unseen force. Cracks splintered across their surface as a storm of red light poured through. Viosha stepped into the vault, her armor cracked but glowing with rage, her blade ignited. Behind her marched dozens of Drethry elites. You defile our ancestors' resting place, she roared. You twist our greatest weapon into submission. I will cut this lie from the root. Azretha's voice thundered across the chamber. You trespass on hallowed ground, child of arrogance. This place is not yours to claim. Viosha pointed her blade toward Kale. You dare call a human commander? The general's flame burns in my veins. You are ours. Kale stepped forward. If that were true, it would have bowed to you. Her eyes narrowed. You are a trick. A parasite wearing a dead man's echo. Saran raised her weapon, standing between them. You don't get it, do you? He's trying to end the same war you keep fighting. Viosha laughed bitterly. There is no end. There is only victory. She lunged. Kale barely had time to react before Azretha's wing swept between them, sending a shockwave that hurled her backward. The Drethry soldiers opened fire, plasma bolts streaking through the vault. Shields flared, deflecting each shot, but the chamber shook under the assault. Kale shouted over the din, buddy, don't kill them. I obey, Azreth rumbled. But I will not allow harm to come to you. Light flared across its scales, forming a barrier of pure flame that sealed Kale and Saran inside the core chamber. Outside, Drethry energy blasts collided with the barrier like meteors against glass. Kale turned toward the crystal again. There has to be more. Something here that can stop this. Azretha's voice softened. There is. But the choice is yours. The crystal pulsed, brightening until it filled Kale's vision. Within it, he saw two paths, one of fire, where Azretha's power would rise again to cleanse the world, and one of silence, where the dragon would return to sleep, taking the old war with it. Saran's voice trembled. Kale, whatever you do, make it count. He stared into the light, his reflection flickering between man and general. The roar of battle thundered around him, and deep within the crystal, he heard his own voice, the one from before, whispering, "The end is never the end. Choose again." Kale closed his eyes. The vault waited. The vault trembled like a living heart under siege. Shards of light cascaded from the ceiling as Virsha's forces pressed against Azretha's barrier, their weapons leaving molten scars across its surface. The roar of plasma fire echoed through the chamber, a storm of fury against ancient silence. Inside the shimmering wall, Kale stood frozen before the crystal heart, its light pulsing in time with his heartbeat. Saran's voice was raw, trembling. Kale, whatever this thing's showing you, you need to choose now. The barrier's failing. He didn't answer. His reflection in the crystal flickered, sometimes himself, sometimes the Drethari general whose memories haunted his dreams. The figure looked back at him with eyes of burning gold, as if waiting. 1,000 voices whispered through the light, all versions of a single soul, all echoing the same truth: you cannot flee what you are. Kale clenched his fists. I'm not him. The voice that came from the light was calm, weary. You are the part of him that regretted. The one who would not lift the blade again. The ground cracked. Azreth let out a roar that shook the pillars. Commander, the vault's defenses weaken. The bloodline seeks entry. Kale turned toward the dragon, eyes wide. If I unleash you again, if I choose fire, does this all start over? Azretha's gaze softened. Fire purges, but it does not heal. Only choice can end the cycle. Saran grabbed Kale's arm. Then choose peace. Let it sleep. End this before more people die. Her words tore at him. He could hear the Drethari outside, their chants rising between gunfire. They weren't fighting just out of hate, they were fighting for belief, for pride in something older than any of them. To them, he was the insult that should never have existed. The crystal pulsed brighter, forcing him to shield his eyes. Through the blinding light, the old general's silhouette stepped closer. He was taller, stronger, armored in the black flame of command, but his face was Kale's. Once, I thought I could save them by ending everything, the echo said. But I only taught them how to destroy. Now you must teach them how to live. Kale's throat tightened. How? They won't listen. Then show them. Outside, the barrier cracked. A burst of energy struck Azretha's flank, and the dragon roared, wings flaring wide. Molten light spilled from the fractures, and Virsha's forces surged forward. She led them, her armor scorched, her blade raised high. Break the shield, she shouted. The vault belongs to the Drethari. Kale turned toward her voice, watching the faint shadow of her form beyond the flickering barrier. He could end her now, one word, one thought, and Azretha's fire would consume them all. The power was there, thrumming beneath his skin, ancient and eager. He remembered the battlefield in the vision, cities burning, skies collapsing, Azretha's wings blotting out the stars. He remembered the silence that followed, the endless ash. No, he whispered. He placed both hands against the crystal. No more fire. The light surged, swallowing the chamber in gold. Azreth stilled, lowering its massive head as the flame along its armor dimmed. The energy barrier faded to a faint shimmer, leaving only Kale and the dragon standing amid the light. Virsha stumbled forward, weapon ready, but stopped as her eyes met Kale's. The entire vault pulsed once, a heartbeat that silenced every gun, every voice. Kale's voice carried through the chamber, quiet but resonant. You want to rule the ashes? You want to be the next in a 1,000-year chain of war? Look around. This is what your glory built. The crystal's light shifted, and the vault projected memories into the air, visions of Drethry wars, planets consumed by fire, cities crumbling under the weight of their ambition. Viosha's soldiers faltered, their weapons lowering as the truth surrounded them. Azretha's voice joined his, low and somber. The Drethry did not fall by the hand of an enemy. They fell by their own reflection. Viosha's eyes darted across the illusions, her breath ragged. Lies, ancient lies. No, Kale said. It's what you refuse to see. You've been fighting ghosts. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Viosha lowered her blade. The light of her armor flickered, dying. If this is true, then what are we now? Kale stepped closer. Alive. That's a start. The crystal dimmed to a soft, steady glow. Azreth bowed its head, the heat fading from its wings. The bond obeys the command of peace. The flames receded from the vault, leaving the chamber bathed in quiet light. Viosha sank to her knees, her soldiers following. For the first time in generations, there was no war cry, only silence. Saran exhaled shakily, lowering her weapon. You did it, she whispered. Kale stared at the crystal. The image of the general faded, leaving only his reflection. No, he said softly. We did. Azretha's massive form began to dissolve into light, the edges of its armor fracturing into motes that drifted upward like sparks. The cycle ends when memory finds mercy. My task is complete. Kale reached out instinctively. Wait. The dragon's voice was faint now, fading like the echo of a star. You carry my will. Led them well, Commander. And then Azreth was gone. The vault fell still. Dust settled over the silent Drethry. Kale stood alone before the crystal, the warmth of its light flickering across his hands. For the first time, he felt the weight of command, not as a burden, but as a promise. Outside, Therion IX's storms began to fade. The winds of Therion 9 carried the dust of old wars. Across the cracked horizon, silence stretched where battle had raged only hours before. The vault's entrance lay half buried in smoke and ash, its obsidian gates fractured but still glowing faintly from the power that had slept within. Above it all, the twin suns burned pale behind the drifting clouds, the world seemed to hold its breath. Kale stood at the edge of the crater, cloak whipping against his legs. He could still feel the pulse of the crystal beneath the earth, though Azretha's voice was gone, no more thunder in his mind, no more heartbeat of ancient flame. Only silence. A silence that felt heavier than the roar of war. Saran approached from behind, her boots crunching against scorched stone. The Drethry forces are pulling back, she said. Viosha called the retreat herself. I think they're waiting. Kale turned slightly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Waiting for what? Saran shrugged. You, I guess. They're not sure if you're going to burn them or save them. He almost smiled at that, almost. I'm not sure I know which one I'm supposed to do. Before Saran could reply, a shadow passed overhead. The ground trembled, not from a living creature, but from something vast stirring in the sky, a shimmer of metal and light refracting through the clouds. Kale's breath caught. A voice echoed from the horizon, amplified through the storm. Cold. Calculated. So this is what my legacy has become. Saran spun, scanning the sky. Who the hell is that? Kale already knew. The tone, the cadence, it was the same one he'd heard in the vault's memory, commanding legions, shaping empires. But now it came from everywhere at once, threaded through satellites and relics, the planet's old systems awakening in unison. XY, Kale whispered. The original general. The voice grew clearer, vibrating through every communicator, every drone still functioning. You were my echo, human. You wielded my dragon. And yet you chose mercy. Kale stepped forward, jaw tight. Mercy is what your people forgot. A low, humorless laugh rippled across the atmosphere. Mercy built nothing. Only fire carves order from chaos. You ended the Dretheri's war, and now they will wither without purpose. You have unmade a civilization. Saran looked at Kale. He's projecting from orbit. The old Dretheri grid, it's reactivating. All around them, dormant machines stirred, old war drones buried beneath the sands, skeletal frames rising from forgotten trenches. Their eyes flared crimson as they came online. Kale's pulse quickened. He's waking them. You cannot end what I created, Xylar said. If the dragon is gone, then the world itself will burn. Bolts of energy lanced from the sky, striking distant ridges. Explosions rippled across the horizon, fire climbing toward the clouds. The ground shook violently. Saran grabbed Kale's arm. We need cover. But Kale stood firm, eyes fixed on the storm. He's not alive. He's a copy, an imprint like the one Azreth carried. But stronger. Older. I am more than memory, Xylar's voice boomed. I am design. I am the directive that binds this species. You carry my fragment, but you lack my resolve. I will show you what your mercy costs. The sky opened. Dozens of colossal shapes descended, Dretheri war constructs, ancient siblings of Azreth, their wings metallic and luminous. Each one moved with terrifying grace, their cores burning with red fire. The air grew thick with static and heat. Saran whispered, Kale, we can't fight that. Kale's voice was steady, though his hands trembled. We don't have to. Not the way he wants. He closed his eyes, reaching inward, searching for the bond, for Azretha's presence, for any trace of the dragon's will. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Then, faintly, a pulse answered. Not a voice. Not words. Just warmth. Kale drew in a breath. He's still with me. The war machines circled, plasma fire gathering in their maws. Xylar's voice filled the world. Kneel, Echo. Accept your place in my order. Kale stepped forward, raising his voice so the skies could hear. You're a shadow talking to dust. You think strength is what survives, but it's mercy that remembers. You burned everything you built, and that's why I'm the one standing here. The nearest construct turned its head, systems hesitating. A ripple ran through the formation, a flicker of doubt coded into their obedience. Kale seized it. You called yourself a creator, he shouted. Then look at what your creation has become. They fight, they hate, they die, and you still demand more. You're not a general anymore. You're just the echo of a mistake. For the first time, Xylar's voice faltered. You are nothing. Kale's voice softened. Then why are you afraid of me? The sky answered with fury. The constructs screamed as one, unleashing torrents of plasma toward the crater. Kale braced for impact, but before the fire could reach him, the ground erupted. A ring of molten energy exploded outward, forming a sphere of gold light. From within, wings unfurled, spectral now, translucent, formed of flame and memory. Azretha's roar split the air, a sound of both defiance and rebirth. Saran shielded her face. Kale. He didn't move. He just looked up, eyes wet with awe. The dragon's form burned bright, no longer bound by metal. It was pure will now, light given shape. Azretha's voice, faint but fierce, echoed through the sky. The commander's will is life. I serve not conquest, but choice. The other war machines halted mid-air, their cores flickering as the echo of command rippled through their code. One by one, their weapons dimmed. Kale raised his hand. Stand down, he said softly. It's over. And for the first time in millennia, the dragons obeyed peace. Xylar's voice howled through the storm, unraveling as static and fury. You cannot erase me. Azretha's light surged, piercing the sky. You erased yourself. The cloud split open, and the voice was gone. Silence fell again. The dragons above drifted into stillness, then slowly dissolved into motes of light. Kale watched until the last ember vanished. His knees gave out, and he sank into the dust. Saran knelt beside him. You did it. Kale shook his head weakly. No, we all did. He looked up at the fading horizon. The war was over, but the world was still waiting to remember how to live. The storm had broken. What remained of the battlefield was quiet, too quiet. The air hung heavy with the scent of ozone and ash, and the last traces of Azretha's light drifted upward like fading embers. Kale stood at the center of the crater, his boots sinking into the cracked stone, eyes fixed on the sky that no longer burned. Around him, Drethari soldiers lowered their weapons, uncertain whether they had survived victory or witnessed extinction. Saran moved to his side, scanning the horizon. The constructs that had filled the air were gone, reduced to dust and code. The silence was unnatural, almost reverent. It's over, she whispered, her voice breaking. Kale didn't answer. He could still hear the echo of Azretha's roar in his bones, the final wordless cry of something vast and ancient letting go. He touched the ground where the dragon had stood, half expecting to feel heat, but there was only cold. From the ridge above, movement caught his eye. Viosha descended slowly, her armor dulled, the red light that had once coursed through it now dim. Her soldiers followed at a cautious distance, unsure if their general meant to fight or kneel. When she reached him, she stopped a few paces away and stared at the crater. You killed a god, she said quietly. Kale shook his head. No. He chose peace. Viosha's eyes flickered, uncertain. Peace. She said the word like it was foreign. The Drethari word for it translates to surrender. Maybe that's why you keep losing, Kale replied softly. She studied him for a long moment, and something in her face shifted, the hardness cracking just enough to show the exhaustion beneath. You sound like him, she said. Kale frowned. Like who? The one from the legends. The human who stood beside the first general before the end. The one who begged him not to burn the world. He blinked. There was another human. Viosha nodded faintly. The archive said he was taken from a conquered world. A strategist. A friend. Some said the general killed him when he tried to stop the purge. Kale exhaled, the pieces of memory aligning in his mind, the echoes he had seen, the regret that had haunted his dreams. He didn't kill him, he murmured. He remembered him. That's why I exist. Saran stepped closer, eyes searching his face. You think you're, what? A copy of that man? I think I'm what the general wished he'd listened to. Kale's voice was calm, almost sad. Azreth said I was the echo of compassion. Maybe I was born because he couldn't forgive himself. Viosha turned her gaze toward the horizon. Then perhaps even gods crave redemption. The ground trembled softly, a low rumble rolling through the crater. The soldiers tensed, but Kale raised a hand. He recognized the sound, not of battle, but of awakening. The vault beneath them was stirring again. The lattice, Saran said, glancing down. It's reinitializing. A beam of light shot upward from the center of the crater, piercing the clouds. Within it, holographic patterns spiraled, symbols forming and dissolving too fast to read. Kale watched as the beam expanded, sweeping across the landscape. Where it passed, old Drethari structures began to shimmer, their scorched surfaces repairing, rebuilding themselves from memory. Saran stared in awe. It's rewriting the world. No, Kale said quietly. It's remembering it. The beam reached the distant ridges, touching the ruins of Drethari cities long buried in dust. Walls rose from the earth, towers reformed from rubble, but this time their shapes were different, less like fortresses, more like sanctuaries. The architecture carried both human and Drethary design, curved and angular, soft and strong. Virsha took a step forward, her voice low. "What are you doing?" Kale shook his head. "Not me. The planet. It's choosing what to keep." The light began to dim, leaving behind a transformed horizon, not perfect, but alive. Kale turned toward Virsha. "You don't have to fight anymore. The code that bound you to conquest, it's gone." Her eyes flickered with something he hadn't seen before, uncertainty. "If not war, then what are we?" "Survivors," Kale said. "Builders. You can choose now." For a moment, she said nothing. Then she extended her blade and pressed it into the ground, kneeling. Her soldiers followed without a word. Saran exhaled shakily, whispering, "Never thought I'd see the day." Kale didn't feel triumph, only relief, deep and fragile. He looked to the sky again, where the last of Azretha's light had vanished. "He gave them a choice," he said softly. "Now it's ours." As if in answer, the twin suns broke through the clouds, bathing the crater in pale light. The warmth felt different now, not harsh, but clean. Kale turned to Saran, a faint smile on his lips. "We should find the others. The humans in the outer colonies, they'll need to know the war's done." She nodded, but her voice was careful. "And if they don't believe you?" "Then I'll show them," Kale said. "The same way I showed her." Virsha rose slowly, her eyes still fixed on the horizon. "If this piece is real," she said, "I will help you keep it. But if it falters, if your kind turns on us, I will remind you what the Drethary were." Kale met her gaze. "Then I'll remind you what we can be." She studied him, then nodded once, a gesture of old soldiers acknowledging one another. The light from the vault faded completely, leaving only the sky, clear, quiet, and infinite. The storm was gone. The ashes were cooling. Kale looked out over the horizon of the reborn world and whispered, "Rest now, buddy. I'll take it from here." The wind carried the words into the silence, where they lingered, a promise left for the soul of a dragon and the ghosts of an empire that had finally learned how to stop fighting. The days that followed were unlike any Kale had known. For the first time, the skies above their Ion 9 were free of smoke. Cities once buried beneath centuries of ruin began to rise again, guided by the luminous memories the vault had released. Human scavengers and Drethary survivors walked the same streets in uneasy silence, building shelters side by side. There were no flags, no banners, no orders barked through static, only the hum of rebuilding, the uncertain rhythm of a world trying to remember how to live. Kale stood at the edge of what used to be Crater City. The skyline shimmered with scaffolds and energy conduits grown from self-repairing stone. He could see Drethary engineers using their hands instead of weapons, human settlers trading food and tools with them. It should have filled him with peace. Instead, he felt a knot of unease tightening in his chest. "Looks better than it ever did," Saran said, stepping up beside him. Her uniform was patched, dust-stained, but her eyes were bright. "You did this." Kale shook his head. "No. The world did. I just stopped burning it." She smiled faintly. "Same thing. He didn't return it. They're working together because they're tired. But exhaustion isn't peace. It's just a pause." Saran leaned against a broken railing, looking down at the city below. "Give them time. They'll find their own rhythm. You can't fix everyone's scars in a week." "Maybe not," Kale said quietly, "but something's still watching." Saran frowned. "You think XYLAR's still out there?" He nodded. "Not him exactly. But something from his network. I can feel it in the air, the old systems aren't fully gone. They're whispering." Before she could answer, the sky darkened slightly. The twin suns dimmed behind a flicker of static, as though reality itself had glitched. Kale felt a pulse through his bones, a low thrum that vibrated through the rebuilt towers. Saran straightened. You felt that too? Yeah, Kale murmured. That wasn't natural. Across the city, Drethari soldiers lifted their heads. The air shimmered. Then, high above, a symbol appeared, a crimson sigil, pulsing faintly, composed of sharp geometric lines. It hung in the sky like a scar. Kale's breath caught. That's the mark of the directive. Saran drew her weapon instinctively. You said you ended it. I thought I did. The ground beneath them trembled. From the center of the city, an enormous spire erupted upward, a black tower of machinery rising from the soil. It split the earth as it ascended, unfolding in layers of red light. The people below scattered, shouting in terror. Kale and Saran backed away as the structure stabilized, humming with power. The sigil above it pulsed again, and a voice echoed through the streets, metallic and cold. Directive Alpha, Reformation Protocol. Kale's heart sank. He left failsafes. Drethari soldiers gathered around the base of the tower, unsure whether to attack or kneel. Virsha arrived moments later, armor gleaming with dust. She looked up at the spire, her jaw tight. You said he was gone. He is, Kale said. But his design isn't. The directive isn't a person. It's a law, built into every war machine he ever made. As if in answer, the ground around the spire split open. Smaller constructs clawed their way out, not dragons this time, but humanoid frames, sleek and silent, eyes glowing red. They moved with precision, forming ranks without a word. Virsha drew her blade. They're ours, she hissed. Ancient soldiers of the Drethari Corps. No, Kale said sharply. They're his. The constructs turned their heads toward him in unison, as if recognizing the echo of the general's soul. One stepped forward, its voice monotone. Identify, incomplete fragment. Directive, reclaim command authority. Kale felt heat building in his palms. The remnant spark of Azreth still woven into him. The construct raised an arm, energy forming at its core. Saran lifted her rifle. Kale. Wait. He stepped forward, meeting the machine's gaze. You don't have to do this. The directive is gone. Contradiction detected, it replied. Directive persists until absolute order is achieved. Kale exhaled slowly. Then let me show you what order costs. He thrust his hand toward the spire. The energy inside him flared, not as flame, but as light. For a moment, the machines hesitated. Their code rippled, struggling against the command that had bound them for millennia. In that pause, Kale spoke softly. You were built to serve, not to think. But the world has changed. Look at it. Images flashed across their optics, human and Drethari rebuilding, laughter echoing between broken walls, children running where soldiers once marched. The constructs froze, their red eyes flickering. One by one, they lowered their weapons. Virsha stared in disbelief. You're reprogramming them? No, Kale said quietly. I'm reminding them. The spire shuddered, systems destabilizing. The sigil in the sky flickered violently, its light fracturing. Then, with a sound like breaking glass, it shattered. The constructs stood motionless. The red glow in their eyes dimmed to white. Saran lowered her weapon. Did it work? Kale looked up at the sky, clear again, untouched. For now. Virsha exhaled, blade still in hand. If remnants of the directive still exist, we will face them. Kale nodded. We'll face them together. For the first time, she didn't argue. As the suns dipped low, their light fell across the reborn city. Kale stood in silence, watching humans and Drethari move through the streets, not soldiers, not conquerors. Just people. The wind carried the faint echo of Azretha's voice through his mind, soft, distant, and proud. You chose well, Commander. Kale closed his eyes and whispered, "Let's hope so." The suns were rising when the last tower fell silent. The spire that had pierced the sky only a day ago now stood dormant, its red veins turned to pale gold. The city beneath it, Crater City Reborn, shimmered in the morning light. Wind whispered through its unfinished streets, carrying the murmur of life instead of war. Kale walked alone through the rebuilt plaza, the stone warm beneath his boots. Workers, human and Drethry, moved around him, repairing what the directive's remnants had torn apart. Children laughed somewhere behind him, chasing light between the scaffolds. He paused to watch them, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. The sound felt foreign, fragile, and achingly real. Saran approached, a datapad tucked under her arm. Her eyes were tired, but she carried herself with quiet pride. "The last of the constructs have been reprogrammed," she said. "They're helping rebuild the outer districts. No signs of hostile code left." Kale nodded, still watching the sky. "What about the colonies?" "Scattered transmissions. Some human enclaves want to open trade routes. Others," she hesitated. "They don't trust the Drethry yet." He sighed softly. "Trust takes longer to build than towers." Saran smiled faintly. "You sound like a leader." "I sound like someone who's winging it," Kale said, but there was warmth in his tone. He turned to her. "You should go with the next envoy. Help them talk. They'll listen to you." She tilted her head. "And you? You're just going to stay here. Someone has to make sure they don't start another war over who gets the bigger statue," he said. She laughed, the first real laugh he'd heard in days. Then her smile faded, replaced by something gentler. "You know, when I met you, I thought you were crazy. Walking up to a giant murder dragon like it was your pet dog." Kale's gaze drifted upward. The suns were climbing higher, and for a moment, he swore he saw a shape, wings made of light, rippling through the clouds. "He was more than a weapon," he murmured. "He was what they could have been if they'd remembered they were alive." Saran followed his gaze, silent. After a while, she said softly, "Do you ever think he knew this would happen? That you'd end up here?" Kale smiled faintly. "I think he hoped I'd make a different choice. And I did." A Drethry voice called from across the plaza. Shah approached, flanked by two of her soldiers. Her armor was no longer adorned with marks of rank, only simple plating, unpainted and clean. She stopped before Kale and inclined her head. "The first council is assembled," she said. "Human and Drethry delegates. They await you." Kale blinked. "Me? You are the bridge between our worlds," Shah said. "Without you, there would be no table to meet at." Saran nudged him lightly. "Told you you're a leader." Kale hesitated, glancing between them. The weight of what lay ahead pressed against him, not war, not command, but something heavier, responsibility without glory. Still, he nodded. "Let's go." They walked together through the plaza toward the newly built hall, a circular structure where Drethry crystal and human steel met in seamless symmetry. Inside, dozens of eyes turned to watch him enter. Some were cautious, others curious, a few openly hostile. But none were closed. Kale stepped to the center and took a slow breath. "We can't rewrite what's behind us," he began. "But we can decide what happens next. The directive is gone. The fire is out. What we build now will be the memory that remains." A murmur rippled through the chamber, not dissent, but contemplation. Shah spoke next, her voice clear. "The Drethry remember strength. The humans remember survival. Perhaps together, we can remember balance." Kale looked at her, a flicker of gratitude passing between them. "Then let's start there." As the council began its work, Kale stepped back, letting the voices rise and fall around him. He listened, really listened. To the arguments, the dreams, the fears. For the first time in countless years, words replaced weapons. When the session finally adjourned, the suns were sinking. Kale slipped out through a side passage, finding himself once again beneath the open sky. The wind brushed against his face, cool and steady. He closed his eyes, and for a heartbeat, the air shimmered. "Commander." The voice was faint, softer than memory, brighter than sound. Kale turned toward the horizon, where the last light caught the edge of the crater. There, outlined against the dying sun, he saw it, a dragon silhouette, vast and luminous, wings stretching across the clouds. Kale smiled, his throat tight. "You kept your promise." The dragon bowed once, slow, graceful, before dissolving into 1,000 sparks that drifted upward and vanished. Kale stood there until the sky dimmed to violet, the stars beginning to bloom overhead. The world around him was still wounded, still raw, but it was breathing again. That was enough. Saran's voice called from behind. "You coming?" He turned, eyes still shining. "Yeah," he said. "Just saying goodbye." She walked beside him as they headed back toward the lights of the city. Above them, the twin suns set on a world that had finally remembered how to stop burning. And as darkness fell, the stars looked down on something they had not seen in millennia, not war, not conquest, but peace born from the ashes of understanding. And somewhere in that silence, a faint voice echoed, proud and content. "Rest well, Commander." Kale whispered into the wind, "You too, buddy." The world answered with quiet.